All right, well, welcome to this installment of Observation and Eyewitness Testimony, brought to you by your forensic science teacher. Go ahead and pause the video for your objectives. Okay, and take a look at these. So a forensic examiner must first be able to find the evidence, to identify it, and secondly, to document it. And this is a very understated reality portrayed in a lot of crime scene investigation shows. The documentation just isn't as exciting, but it does take up a lot of the percentage of time on the job. Thirdly, interpretation or analysis of the evidence and getting ideas of leads, perhaps from the evidences that you have processed. Okay, I'd like for you to take a look at this photograph, just kind of notice some things about it. Alright, now I'm going to get in your way here. Sorry about that. And I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about it. The first thing is, how many people were pictured? Easy enough, right? Were they male or female? How many were wearing ties? What was in the bottom left of the picture? Top left in the background? How about background and to the right of the picture? Alright, so let's see how you did. Okay. So, you see that there are 5 individuals here. They're all female, 2 of which are wearing ties. There's a rock in the bottom left, a building in the back left, and cars in the back right. So maybe you did very well on this, I'll be honest. Sometimes my observation skills are worse than my 2-year-olds. But I'm working on it. And it is something that can be honed. It's a skill that can be practiced and worked on. So let's talk about some of the strategies in doing that. In order to understand how to be a better observer, we have to understand how information is processed in the brain. So very basically, we've got information coming in from our senses. This would be auditory, visual, olfactory, etc. And so from there, our brain determines what we actually pay attention to, which is determining our perception. So one quick note on this, individuals who have autism have more of a constant flow of high amounts of stimulation. So for example, how many times in the last 2 minutes have you been aware of the feeling of the clothes on your back? Probably not very often, even though I hope that we all have clothes on our backs. And the reason is that the nerves are still sending those signals to the brain of the feeling of the way that your clothes feel. But your brain's saying, oh, that's old news, I'm not going to allocate as much attention to that right now. And so, consequently, a person who has autism, the brain doesn't so much make that distinction, and that can be a very overwhelming thing with all the stimuli that are experienced. From what is perceived, then a small amount of that would go into short-term memory, and an even smaller amount of that to long-term memory. Now, beyond that, our brains tend to fill in gaps, which makes a lot of sense in a survival sense. So you can try to infer patterns. Hey, the last time that Uncle Larry ate that red berry outside, it didn't turn out well for him. So therefore, red berries, da-da-da-da-da. And you can kind of fill in gaps in your observation, remembering where those berries were picked or things like that. However, in the context of serving as an eyewitness for testimony, sometimes filling in information can be a really inaccurate type of thing. Okay, I'd like for you to try to read this paragraph. Go ahead and pause the video now. So it may have surprised you how easy it was for you to find meaning out of this paragraph where almost every single word is misspelled. And so this just shows, this is evidence of how your brain can fill in gaps to make sense of what you're seeing. Now, in another example of this, let's say you look at this photograph and maybe you think about really good memories from your great-grandmother's house. She had this long driveway and it brings back really positive feelings. Or maybe you look at it and you think, oh, well that's dawn, the sun's coming up. But based on your prior experiences, that may have led you in the wrong direction if I tell you that this is actually dusk when the sun's going down. So we make these assumptions, we bring these assumptions to us in our observations. Alright, let's take a look at these individuals. They're having a good time, chatting it up. And so observations are very deeply affected by our emotional state. A person who is feeling very depressed will be very distracted by that inner feeling and maybe not as perceptive to what else is going on. Conversely, if you are around other people, you may be paying less attention to the other things that are going on around you. Further, crime scene reports will vary based on these factors: level of interest of the observer, stress level, concentration, what kind of distractions may be present, and this is a big one, any prejudices that that observer may have. Even accidentally, if you have a prejudice surrounding a certain people group, then your mind might fill in gaps based on something that that person didn't really do. And so it's important to be aware of those prejudices, personal beliefs, and any motives surrounding that eyewitness. Also, obviously, as more time goes by from the event, then those memories become less accurate. Now, this is a fascinating project called the Innocence Project. It's a non-profit organization, and their goal is basically to exonerate or free wrongfully convicted criminals. And so to date, there have been 325 wrongfully convicted criminals that have since been exonerated. By the way, 18 of those spent some time on death row. You see, the project began in 1992. The date is significant because DNA evidence is the primary type of evidence used to actually show the innocence of certain people who were wrongly convicted. 1984 is when Alec Jeffreys developed the DNA fingerprinting technology that is used for DNA profile, and 1987 was when it was first used in a court case. So most of the cases that are evaluated by the Innocence Project are A, those that happened before the mid-1980s, and B, those that have DNA evidence available that could be evaluated in going back and taking analysis of that. So you see the stat here: faulty eyewitness identifications account for up to 87% of wrongful convictions, and that is a staggering number, pointing wrongful eyewitness to these wrongful convictions. I picked just a single case to kind of make this come alive a little bit more, the work of the Innocence Project. So in 2010, a guy named Barry Gibbs was awarded settlement money from both the city of New York and the state of New York for wrongful sentence that he was carrying out. So in 1986, he was convicted of second-degree murder of a lady named Virginia Robertson. She was a prostitute. And as it was later uncovered, in part by work by the Innocence Project, the witness who gave incriminating information during trial was coerced by an NYPD detective. P.S. This detective was later convicted for serving as a mob hitman on the side. So back to Barry Gibbs. He served almost 19 years of his 20-year sentence when the Innocence Project showed this new evidence, and so he was awarded the largest civil rights settlement in New York City history at $9.9 million. He was also awarded a $1.9 million settlement by the state of New York. By the way, he was repeatedly denied parole during that sentence because of a lack of admission of guilt, and he ended up being exonerated in 2006. Alright, so tips for how you can be a good observer. You can observe systematically. So this would entail starting at one part, running your eyes over every space. This reminds me of when we talked about investigators' techniques with taking a look at systematically for a search, grid line pattern, a spiral search, etc. So it's not just kind of hit or miss, you're more systematic about it. And not assuming that you'll remember everything, documentation as you go is important. Okay, this is a tough one, and that is turning off filters. So what you would normally not pay attention to because you think it's probably not important may be the very thing that you do need to pay attention to. So you have to kind of consciously hone your ability to turn off those filters when you were trying to take in all the information possible at that scene or in that encounter and so forth. So the theme here is you want to take in the information and then analyze it later. And being aware of prejudices in your own thinking processes as well as those in eyewitness accounts. Documentation, once again, is a super important part of an investigator's work, and photography is a big part of how that documentation process works. So it wouldn't be uncommon for an investigator to take 400 to 500 digital images at a single scene. Also, sketches and writing down lots of detail about that is good practice as well. A couple more tips that you see here. Alright, and so we're going to take a look at a couple of summary points. And I'll say thank you for joining on the Observation and Eyewitness Testimony Screencast.